Terry. Hello, Carrie.
Hey, Paulo.
G'day, Paulo.
How are you? Is it morning there in Australia? It's night here in Brazil. How are you doing? How's the weather?
I'm in the Blue Mountains, just out of Sydney in New South Wales, and it's a beautiful winter's day. It probably get to about 18 degrees with the sun out, so it's lovely.
And you, Carrie, how's the weather there?
Yeah, it's actually really nice, Paulo. The sun's out. It's not very warm. I'm in South Australia, so a little way away from Terry. But will be a sunny, probably about an 18-degree day as well in the middle of winter, which can't be complained about.
Great, and you have a very beautiful painting there. It's from the
Yes,
indigenous.
actually,
Yeah.
a South Australian Indigenous woman by the name of Samantha Golem, actually, when you mentioned it earlier. She incredible artist, and in fact, her artwork's at the new Royal Adelaide Hospital that just opened. So I'm very lucky to have that.
Oh, very beautiful, beautiful colors. Well, let's say hello to the people who are watching us, because the idea here is the three of us will present ourselves for those who doesn't know any of us or one of us, and then we'll explain to you what we are doing here. So I'll start introducing myself. My name is Paulo Moratelli. I'm a psychologist. I live in Brazil, and I've been working with prevention, mediation, and conflict and crime transformation for the past 10 years. During this time, I've been working with very serious and complex cases. I dealt with cases of sexual abuse, gender violence, homicides, children, adolescents in state shelters, juvenile justice, family cases, among many other stuff. These cases are carried out in court cases, in schools, universities, prisons, communities, public and private companies. In conducting these cases, used many strategies, techniques, methods, and theories about conflict mediation, restorative justice, conflict transformation, and so on. Over these years, I have adapted these practices and try to do my own stuff, my own method, based on my work as psychologist, using various group methods, and also using these techniques such as various mediation models, peacemaking circles, restorative conferencing, etc. And I call this method that I've developed transformative dialogues. And it can be applied on any relational dimension, including mainly in conflicts and serious crimes. I've conducted a few hundred meetings using this conflict transformation method. In addition, I have worked for several years now as an instructor, consultant, or supervisor of these methods. So it's fair to say that I had a lot of experience in this field. However, last year, when I held the first International Congress on Restorative Justice here in Brazil, in Brasilia, our federal capital, the Congress on Social Transformation, among other people, I ended up meeting Terry O'Connell. Ted Wachtel introduced ourselves. I thank you, Ted, every time for that. And from that first contact, me and Terry, the opportunity arose to act as co-instructors in some courses here in Brazil in 2018. And we had also planned courses and other events in Australia and Singapore for 2020. In June 2020, was supposed to be together right now, but these events were rescheduled for 2021 due to the pandemic. So a little bit sad now, but you know, we are here together. In this joint performance, I was impressed with the ideas and experience and the way Terry sees and do this stuff. So Terry O'Connor, your concepts have been fundamental in deepening my understanding in my practice. I had never met anyone with such experience, expertise, and a deep understanding on what goes on in a meeting, whether individual meeting or a collective meeting, where we are dealing with people who are suffering and or committed serious harm to other people. So Terry, you brought me extreme clarity on how to make my work even more meaningful and resolutive for the people I'm working with. I became much more explicit and competent and objective in the delivery of my tasks as a facilitator before the subjects in the conflict or more serious damage and harm. So, what we're doing here, we're preparing some stuff that deliver to you because we believe that the time has come for us to share this knowledge in a more efficient and an in-depth way with more people. Okay, so that's why we are here today. But first, let's hear a little bit about you, Terry. Can you tell us a little bit about your career, of your experience, where those ideas came from, etc. So the word is with you. Please go on.
Thanks, thanks, Paulo, and thanks for the introduction. One of the highlights of my year last year was meeting Paulo. Not only is he a very experienced practitioner, but a psychologist who has really worked around really complex matters. And I guess meeting him was the opportunity to get him to actually stop and think about all the things that he did, but to understand why he did it and why doing it worked. In other words, the idea, as he's mentioned, of being explicit. So my journey began, if we talk about restorative, my journey began when I was a cop. I was a cop in the New South Wales Police Service for nearly 30 years, and there was a critical incident happened in June of 1973 that was really my first sort of formal engagement around what we're now calling restorative, which was a young fellow, we'll call him Gary, assaulted me when I was attempting to apprehend him in a dance hall. He'd been involved in a fight. I removed him from the hall, let him go. I said, we can work it out. And the young people came out anyhow. He ends up throwing a punch and knocking me to the ground. I got up, I grabbed him again, and my colleague said, he's done it this time. He's been charged twice with assault and he'll go to prison, juvenile prison. What happened was I started to realise that we needed to really understand the why of what was happening for this young guy. And rather than charge this young fellow, what I did was to bring him and his mum in the police station. We sat in a circle, 3 chairs, in this 2-room police station. And I remember very clearly the mum's sort of distressed look, burst into tears when she looked at me because my eye had swollen. And anyhow, what I was interested in is what was really happening for this young guy that was triggering the behaviours. And I developed a dialogue which was, tell me about this young fellow. And then I said to him, what happened last night? What were you thinking? Anyhow, long and short of it was, we ended up with a very different conversation. One in which I got to discover that his dad had been killed in a motor vehicle accident 14 months earlier. And he is a young 14-year-old kid who simply didn't know how to deal with the trauma of that experience. And what I've learnt since is the impediment to all of this is his inability to deal with his own shame. And we will go into that in greater detail when we do a webinar training. But I guess the takeaway from that was, as a young cop, I realised that how I engaged others was critical, and I needed to really understand the why of what I saw. Everyone knew what Gary was doing. He was behaving badly. What he was doing was against the law, okay? What I was interested in is how could I genuinely interrupt that behaviour in a way that allowed him to make different choices. To cut the long story short, this characterised how I policed. I ended up in 1989 as a senior sergeant, being put in charge of a group of young cops at a place called Wagga Wagga. And for the first time, I was given the opportunity to actually sit police in a circle and ask them about what mattered. They all looked at me confused. What do you mean, what matters? And then what we got to really understand is we all had the same motivation, want to be cops because we want to make a difference. But we then realised that what we were doing didn't make a great deal of sense. And I guess the focus of our group was really proactive policing, was how to better respond to young people who were involved in crime. And that was the beginning of, we're influenced to the extent that I was aware that in 1989 legislation on family group conferences in New Zealand was passed. I intuitively understood the process of engagement, and then I began using my authority as a cautioning sergeant to change the conversation I had with young people, their families, by adding victims to the mix. And I guess within 6 months had developed a script, a conference script that's now become the IIRP script. And I guess I soon realised, or quickly realised, that rather than seeing this as a program, I really got to appreciate that the moving bits was really about a general relational practice that had universal application. And I guess what I've been able to do is to continue to evolve my thinking and practice. So, for example, the word restorative, my definition of it based on my thinking and practice has changed significantly, and there's no reference at all to victims and offenders. In fact, I put out to my colleagues what attracted you to restorative, what was the definition when you first became interested, and given the evolution of thinking and practice, how would you describe or define restorative? And my great colleague, Mark van der Veen, in Canada, came up with something that was very close to my thinking, and he said restorative practice is a way of thinking and being, focused on creating safe spaces for real conversations that deepen relationship and create stronger, more connected communities. Now, what's really important about that was I wanted to actually understand the why of all practice, and that my starting point was, and this is a simple way of introducing Kerry, was to actually, rather than talk about restorative, I really wanted to discover where people were at in terms of their own thinking and practice and how they got there. And through that process, to identify what was working, and then introduce the idea of restorative as a way of making what they do that work much more intentional, consistent, and impactful. And in fact, in introducing Kerry has been an extraordinary practitioner. I met her in 2009 when she invited me to actually come to this small organisation she'd developed that had 10 staff. And over the next 6 years, Kerry had developed an organisation that was a truly restorative organisation. Won some national awards, we had a caseload of 1,000 young people, but Kerry learnt that to be an effective restorative practitioner, you need to integrate restorative in your own lives, in how you deal with one another in the work situation, in terms of how you engage others. And the idea of restorative being made explicit allowed us to offer a language and a practice that importantly could be shared with those we were reaching out to. So I'll hand it over to you, Kerry. Take it away.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, wow, it's been a long journey. When I first met Terry, in fact, I'd actually been to some of Terry's training several years before 2009, but did one of those things where you go and do a training and go back into an organisation where you're the only one that's done it, and it didn't get traction. But then in 2009, I was building this organisation. The fascinating thing was that I thought I was looking for a program that was going to make the greatest difference to our communities. And a colleague of mine, actually Sharon Malone, said to me, "You need to meet this man called Terry O'Connell." And I thought he was going to come and deliver me this incredible program that was going to transform our communities. And what I soon learned was after about 150 questions from Terry that it was actually nothing to do with about the program. It was all about the practice. And I talk fondly about what I call now, the practice before theory, and now I have an understanding and a framework and a way of exactly what Terry said. And, Paula, you talked about the impact it had on on the way you deliver your service and practice. We went from having regular structured dialogue and conversations as leaders. We regularly challenged each other's practice. We did all of these elements that were really relational, I guess, in terms of what we were doing. But then when we were able to embed it explicitly and wrap a restorative framework around it, we were able to be more deliberate, more intentional, and on purpose. But the critical game changer for me as a practitioner was when we were able to articulate and share our practice with those we serve, aka our community, in a way that they understood it like we did, and they got to replicate it in their own life. And I talk about that's where you get true sustainable community change and traction, because we are no longer the holders of this almighty program, practice framework, whatever it is that we believe is going to make the greatest difference. But if we can share it and articulate it, was the critical factor. And the other thing that changed and transformed our organisation, and Terry alluded to it before about a way of being, and Mark's definition sort of alludes to that as well. And that was that I developed the 4 pillars of restorative practice. Pillar number 1 being self. If I can't self-regulate, have self-awareness and self-regulate my own behaviour and repair my relationship with myself when things go wrong, how on earth could I be in a relationship with anyone else? Pillar number 2 is then how do I be restorative with my colleagues and co-workers and our organisations? Before pillar number 3, we can be restorative with our young people and communities and families that we serve. And one of my key sayings is I don't have any expectation of anyone else that I don't have of myself. So hence the 4 pillars. And the 4th pillar for us is about community. How do we explicitly share this framework with those in our communities so that they can then replicate it in their own life? And AKA basically manage and build and develop healthy relationships and deal with conflict and harm when it arises, because it's a natural part of a relationship. So yeah, I guess just very quickly, a little bit more about me. I spent the last 30 years, plus years these days, working started in juvenile prisons. Same thing as what Terry said, I realised that I was trying to make a difference, come with a big heart and you care deeply, but actually didn't know what a difference looked like, nor what our role as practitioners were in making that difference until we were able to be explicit in our practice. So spent years working in juvenile prisons and home detention for young people, managing and building not-for-profit organisations with both the government department as well as with non-government organisations. And yeah, until recently, I guess the last few years, I've dedicated most of my time to teaching and sharing now. I say to people, I'm not a trainer. I'm somebody who shares my restorative story and my journey because I've embedded it in every part of my life, personally and professionally. And it's been a game changer for me on many levels. So I might hand back over to you, Paulo or Terry.
It's amazing here from both. and it's unbelievable to have the chance to work with you two with so much experience and practice in this field. So what we are doing here, so we're trying to explain, we will try to explain now our vision of what we want to do. We want to deliver a training course online, since that's the way things are now. It's a new thing for Terry, it's a new thing for me, but it's not so new to Carrie. Carrie has been doing that with very success, as we've been seeing you doing that. So we'll do a free webinar in a few days. So if you who are listening to us and watching us now, we're putting later our contacts, how you can manage to be with us in this free webinar. So in this free webinar, we are delivering some stuff on the basis of restorative justice, the shame theory, and all those things that we're doing now in our work. And of course, we've been the leader of this game is Terry O'Connell. So Terry, what do you think if you can tell us a little bit about what we are trying to deliver to the people in this free webinar?
Thanks, Paulo, and thanks, Kerry. Let me just introduce my friend who waves the flag, kangaroo, and yeah, you know.
This is one of the good or the bad kangaroos?
Oh no, that's a good kangaroo. He's got a little Joey in the pouch. Yeah.
I have noticed that you have some kangaroos who are really bad ones.
Well, they're all good. It's just that behaviour's not too bad sometimes.
Oh, okay.
Remember that? The other thing we have is, and you know, when we actually have the webinar and we'll run the training, this little beast, it's called an Echidna. It's a beautiful little animal, but what it does is, as a protective mechanism, when it's threatened, it actually rolls into a ball like that, and it becomes like that. Now, I'm going to let the secret out, but for those of you who are interested and will follow or even participate in our training, that is pivotal as a visual. We have many other visuals, of course. Remember, Kerry was talking about the idea of being explicit, being able to share the practice and the language. So what we've got are kits, we've got posters, you know. I can't understand yours. Are they English or what?
Portuguese.
Yeah, Portuguese. And of course the little cards. Now, I guess what we're hoping, and this isn't particular to those who are interested or working in the restorative field. In fact, if I had my time over, there's a little known fact that 20 odd years ago, I tried to change the name from restorative to relational. And I got so much pushback, I was going to be excommunicated from the movement. But what we're trying to do is to reach out to practitioners generally to really challenge you about the rationale for your own practice, helping you to be much more explicit. When I talk about rationale, to be able to answer the questions, what you do, why you do that, why doing it works, how you know. And as Kerry said, what a difference looks like. You know, the story's pretty simple. If you can't describe, it's like family violence. When I ask, what outcomes are you looking for? Most can't describe it. Now, the story is pretty simple. If you're not sure where you're going, any road will do, and you'll never ever get there. So I guess what we offer is, apart from a vast amount of experience, is to is to help practitioners make better sense and meaning of their own practice, to determine and to be clear about what's important, what matters, so they can get to work out what it is that needs to change or to be strengthened. And importantly, to help them develop a sort of a framework of explicit practice so that what they do is much more intentional. But importantly, as Kerry said, the idea of actually being able to share the language and the practice with those they're working with. What was particular about all of those who worked with Kerry was that the young people and their families all were given little cards. In other words, they were able to have a conversation that was more likely to draw others in than push them away. That's what I think the three of us will bring to the table.
So I guess me and Kerry could add some stuff on that, you know? So Kerry, what else you think you could bring to this conversation in terms of theory or practice or whatever? Yeah. What would you like to add on that?
Yeah, look, I think all of what Terry said, but I think that some of the value add will be, you know, as a practitioner who still to this day embed this in everything I do, from everything personally, professionally, organisational culture. And I guess Terry alluded to, you know, an award, and we were able to actually create Australia's 6th best workplace culture by embedding restorative processes in everything we did. We changed every policy and procedure. We changed everything, the way we did everything in terms of the way we engaged with staff and leadership. So I think that there's a significant, you know, and then the interesting thing, Paul, remember I said, I was looking for a program that was going to make the greatest difference to young people and families that we were serving in our community. And what I got was a practice framework, but the unintentional outcomes we got, we were an employer of choice. We didn't advertise for a staff member for the last 5 years of operation. And our sick leave went to less than 2%. Our staff turnover went to less than 2%. Our sick leave basically disappeared. So the unintended organisational and staff outcomes was what we never ever expected. And so I think there's a lot for us to talk about in how we can really create healthy, connected workplace and organisations to ensure that we can then get the best outcomes for young people in our communities. And I always talk about, you know, I wake up every day to contribute towards a restorative Australia and a restorative world. And it's exactly what Terry said. What I mean by that is, how do we be connected? Because we're hardwired as human beings for connection. So how do we meet that innate need in a way that's healthy and constructive and has us be healthy, connected members of our communities? So there's some of the things that I'd be really keen to explore more.
Yeah, and I myself would like to add some stuff, mostly on psychology stuff, on how to deal with group meetings and the things that you have to be aware on the emotional stuff and the relational stuff and the things that prevent people to create bonds and to recognize their feelings and emotions and etc. So of course the main things would be presented by Terry, but me and Kerry will add some little stuff, some little things that I guess it's really important for us, and we can share with you these ideas. And we want to do that in the very innovative way, because these days we can use a whole lot of resources using the Zoom, and we can use videos, we can use presentations, we can use a whole lot of resources. It would be very interesting. We can show you how we use this Hoberman spheres that every one of us had these spheres, and how to deal with the shame how people, how to deal with people who are suffering from serious harms and etc. So it will be very interesting. So for you to know, people, we're gonna add a text with this video explaining you the way you can get in contact with us to subscribe on this webinar, which will be free, totally free. Of course, later on we can put on a training course. That one will not be free, but in this free webinar, you can get in touch with this whole these ideas that we are talking about here. Carrie, Terry, do you want to explain a little bit more about that? Do you want to add something?
Paulo, I just want to make the point that what's critical, it really comes out of what Kerry was talking about. The key to learning is collaboration. And you never arrive because it's always an ongoing. And when you collaborate and you're really explicit around it, your learning goes exponentially. So I'm so fortunate to have two colleagues in my life that, notwithstanding my experience, every day is a school day. In other words, we continue to learn. And what made the difference with Kerry's organisation was that everyone was singing off the same hymn sheet, practice hymn sheet. They were explicit. And our argument is simple. We develop a modelling amongst ourselves that works in building strong collegial relationships, and then we can go out and ply our trade with those who are struggling for sense and meaning. So I just want to make that point, that everything we do is collaborative. Yeah. And when it comes to experts, I guess the bad news is we're actually not the experts.
Yeah.
You as a practitioner are the expert. When you engage a family, they're the experts. Our role, as Kerry said, I asked her 150 questions, is to create the space in which those you're reaching out to can begin to make sense and meaning of what's happening and what matters. So I'm looking forward to the next edition.
Amazing. Carrie, do you have some final considerations?
Oh no, just the same. I'm really looking forward to spending some more time with you guys and unpacking this together, because I think the consistency across all of our practice is quite unique. We do very different things, but through a very similar lens and frame. So I'm just really excited for stage 2.
Yeah, I'm excited too. It's unbelievable to have a chance to do that, to be part of this team. So the idea is simple, is to share with you our experiences, our ideas, our frameworks, and our beliefs, and etc. So the idea is you can learn with us, and we can learn with you, as Terry says, in a more not so much a pedagogy way, but a otagogy way, as Terry usually says. So every one of us will be learning together in a collaborative, cooperative way. So you are all invited. We will have the text with the ways you can subscribe to this webinar, this free webinar, and it will be a pleasure for us to have you. So in that way, our frustration about Singapore and the pandemic and etc., where it's not happening right now, we're doing some very beautiful stuff. We are still working together, okay? For me, it's a bye-bye for now. I hope to see you soon, Carrie and Terry.
Cheerio.
Thanks, see you guys.
We say cheerio.
Bye bye, my Aussie friends.
Yeah.
And see you soon. Bye bye.